kind of the communication.
So my name's Charles Johnson. We'll start there. I was a psychology major when I went to school. Went to Illinois State, fantastic school. And I didn't know what actuarial science was. Like most of you here, I was good at math. And so when I went to my advisor, she said, we have this really rigorous math program, but it's got some really hard tests. And at the time, the hardest test I'd ever taken was like a calculus final. And so I kind of thought, oh yeah, no problem. So I dove into the major, very steep learning curve. Didn't pass an exam in my first year and a half in the major. Struggled a lot with classes. But I had a really supportive professor, very active actuarial club, and some of the upperclassmen coached me, and the professor really pushed me. And so I started, I took my first exam and realized that, one, it's obnoxiously difficult, but very rewarding. And kind of fell in love with the process of diving deep. And so I started passing exams, didn't really take breaks between sittings. And then I landed an internship at Pac Life out in California, and I took over as president of the Actuarial Club, and then I graduated with a couple of job offers, and I took one at State Farm in their life insurance department. And so the activity, the responsibility of being president of the Actuarial Club was very rewarding to me. I felt like I had a lot of value I could give to underclassmen, and there were a lot of opportunities I thought to give back for all the people who would kind of help me along that path. So when I graduated and I started working in the real world, I continued kind of being involved at my local university level. And that's kind of how this presentation came to be. Is I continued hearing questions, and I started going to other colleges too. There were some smaller colleges close to where I was working, and I started going and talking to the students. And I was on the recruitment team as well, even early on. So I got to see students come in, look at their resume, see how they interviewed, and I got to see how they performed after they were hired, and started kind of getting an idea of how you identify quality talent. But the thing I kept running into was students went to advice often from career services, particularly at smaller schools. And what I found was career services don't have a lot of expertise in the actuarial field usually, because it's very specific and technical. And even professors and other students tend to meet you where you're at and say, oh, if you could do this one more thing, or just do this one extra thing, it would make a difference. And I thought that was very disingenuous, because from the recruitment side, if you improve by one incremental amount, but you're still, 10 amounts from where you need to be to get a job, then improving one thing doesn't really help you. And so I put together this presentation of what does it take to get a job? What does it really take to get a job? And I broke it down very actuarially. There's a process that we go through. And it varies a little bit from company to company, from consulting to mutual or public, but the formula is generally the same. And I've worked with quite a bit of other recruiters as they've gone through the process. And so when I explain it to students, I explain it like this. If you're applying for jobs and you're not getting phone calls for screening round interviews, your resume is the problem. If you are getting screening interviews and you are not making it onto on-sites, then you aren't delivering what your resume says you should deliver. And if you're making it to on-sites, and it's particularly multiple on-sites, and you're not getting offers, I don't think that you're trying to portray the right things about yourself in those final round interviews. And so I'm going to take a minute. We're going to go into each one of those three, the requirements we look for, how to structure each one of those things from questions to answers to resumes. And hopefully, at the end of this, you guys, particularly if you're freshmen or sophomores, can plan out what it takes to get from where you are to where you want to be, and really gets you ready for this recruitment season. So if you're in this call right now and you don't know, this is recruitment season. It started. It's happening literally right now. From now until the end of October, almost every actuarial entry-level job and actual internship will be filled across the country. So as soon as this call is over, I expect every single one to go and update your resumes, to take a few things that I mentioned in this away, and really get ready to start applying as rigorously and as wide as you possibly can. Apply for far more jobs than you think that you'll need. All right, so the resume. So when I started working at State Farm, I worked my way up to the head of recruitment. I moved to Milwaukee and I joined the recruitment team here. So I probably have reviewed 100 resumes a season for the last couple of years. And I've got very specific things that I look for in those that I think will help you when you're designing your resume for the first time. Now, there are three things should be at the top of every single resume. Every single one, these three things. I don't even look for anything else in the resume until I have these three pieces of information. A common question I get is, how can I make my resume look fancier or nicer? And what I tell students is, I don't care what your resume looks like. I care what's on it. So simple, clear, standard structure that other people have. Excellent way to go about building your resume. But there are three pieces of information you want on the top, no matter what. And they're really important for us as recruiters because they help us be very efficient as we go through those. First one is exams. How many exams do you have done? And are you sitting for another one in the next 3 to 6 months? It's very important. Almost all internships require one exam. Almost all full-time jobs require 2 exams. And I'm going to push this a step further. Right now is going to be the most contentious recruitment season that the college graduates have faced in a long time. And on top of that, the access to resources and the ability to study are increasingly easy and more effective. So the competitiveness level of graduates is going up. And exams are both a minimum standard that companies use and also a bar for how capable and driven is this individual. So the first thing, your name, your information, the first piece of information about your qualifications should be exams. When I passed it, and am I sitting for the next one? Second thing is graduation date. So where are you going to school? When do you graduate? This is really important because for internships, almost all internships require you to go back to school after the internship is over. So if you're graduating soon, I need to know that right away. Or, some internships don't or do hire sophomores. And so knowing that information is normally very important. So exams, when you graduate, and your GPA. The general rule of thumb in the actual recruitment world is 3.5 minimum. There are some that go down to 3.25. And there are definitely people I've interviewed who have been slightly below that. But they have a pretty robust resume for the rest of what's going on. But those three things need to be on top. I want to see them right away. If I have to look for them on a resume, immediately frustrates me a little bit. Puts me in a different place than you want me to be when I'm viewing your resume. You want it as easy, as clear, as obvious. I know what you're looking for, recruiter. Don't worry, I'm exactly it. And here are all the things that you have. Look, I passed 2 exams. I graduate, I'm a sophomore. I graduate in 2 years. I have, a 3.65 GPA. And then we can worry about the rest of the resume. But I really spend more time than I need to on those 3 because it's really important that those are very, very obvious for us. And also, if you're planning what you're doing with your career or with your college career, those 3 things should take priority over everything else. You need to pass exams, you need to get good grades. And you need to do it at a pace where you are passing exams before you're searching for jobs. So many of the people on this call, you're not going to have time to pass an exam before recruitment season's over. So recruitment season next year, if you want to be recruited, you got to have exams passed. The rest of the resume, I separate it into 3 sections now. I used to say the bottom is your skills. You'll have work experience, volunteering and leadership, and then skills. But I've kind of flipped this on its head. I think that the first thing below your school and what your major and minor is, your GPA, your graduation, should be your technical skills. Let me be very clear here. Technical skills. If you put on your resume leadership skills, great communication skills, I have never chosen to interview someone because they self-proclaimed some self-quality they have. If you're a good leader and a good communicator, I should see examples of that on your resume. If you're qualified and I call you, I will know whether your communication skills are good. When I am looking at skills, what I really want to know are what computer programming languages or software do you have experience with that I think is going to be valuable? Now, a lot of people ask, does it matter the coding language? For most recruiters, it doesn't. What we really want to know is, do you have experience coding at all? Do you have experience in multiple languages? Because if you can code in Java and SQL, I can teach you VBA, or I can teach you SAS, or I can teach you C++ or Python. I can change the syntax, but do you have that experience of learning and applying computer science skills at all? And I will say increasingly, the demand for computer science skills is up. And based on my experience, the candidates that have more coding experience when they come into the job generally outperform their peers. So another common question I get when I give this presentation is, are there any minors that will help me stand apart? And for the most part, no. Finance, econ, statistics, those are all things that you'll learn purely just getting your major in actuarial science. But having a minor in computer science, where you're really diving into the coding and how to apply a lot of those math skills in the computer science way, I think that differentiates yourself. So, exams, GPA, when you're graduating, skills, technical skills. Next is experience. I think if you have any work experience, it's important to show. But what I look for when I look at experience, and this is why I tend to be more flexible with experience than work experience, is I want to know, have you applied the technical skills that you learned or you know? I've passed P and FM, I know these two coding languages. What I want to know is, have you actually applied it? Is there a way that I can talk to you and discern that you truly have understood and implemented that knowledge in a way that you can explain it to me? Now, the best way to do this is an actuarial internship, right? If you come out, you're a rock star sophomore, you have an exam or 2 exams passed, and you land an internship your sophomore year, that will put you leagues ahead of everyone else. And given the challenging recruitment season, there are probably people on this call that are going to have to compete against candidates like that. So if you're a freshman, take that really seriously. You have the capacity to stand out very early on in your collegiate career, and I highly, highly encourage you to take advantage of it. Because any experience in the actuarial world, particularly paid internships, are a huge differentiator. Now, if you don't have that, I advise a lot of students to just get internships in general near that field. So can you get in general insurance, underwriting, any data science or computer science internship, any way that you can get corporate experience where you apply technical skills? That will make it much easier for me as a recruiter to evaluate, do you actually know the things that you're talking about? The next thing is, if you can't get an internship or you're early on, finding some way to volunteer or some work project or school project. So school projects are generally good. A lot of students have some type of regression, applying R or maybe a Python class. But one of the ways that I really advise is like doing case competitions that companies put out. I think it's a great way to look at real world problems that companies are facing, get access to data, and then work in a team, which is kind of the last part we'll talk about in the resume. So while having work experience is good in general, I like to see that you have some experience in a field and that you have some work ethic. And, we definitely take it into consideration. If you're working part-time while going to school, that's a very challenging thing. If you can pass exams and get good grades while doing that, you definitely help yourself stand out. But what I really look for on that resume is, are there applications of technical skills that I will be able to interview someone about and really know for certain whether they are as competent as the resume says they are. And the last one is, we'll call it volunteer. I like to think of it as the leadership section, or the group work section. And so this is the one where we put, I was in this organization, or I did I'm a member of the Actuarial Science Club. It's a classic, every resume should have it. But really what I'm looking for here are there examples where you've influenced the actions of others? Are there situations here where you've had to deal with conflict? Those are the two biggest things that I look for there. So if you're a member of 4 organizations, I'm honestly going to knock you for it. What I want to know is, have you taken the initiative to lead something? And I'll caveat this because we'll get into this in a minute. But resume builders. Resume builders are only good if you can actually back them up with actions. And if you just but you have no stories or actionable items to back it, it'll come through in the screening interview. So you can't just put it on your resume, you have to go do it. But this is the section where you demonstrate that you can influence the actions of others. You can take on projects and drive them to the end, on a voluntary basis. That's something you're interested in. That you can work well in teams, you can delegate, you can deal with conflict when things come up. So that last section, I like to say that that's a lot of your interview right there. That's where you describe all of those intangible qualities beyond the ability to understand and apply math that would make you a great team member, right? Well, I'm interviewing you to figure out if you should come work with me. That's ultimately what I'm trying to decide as a recruiter. Not just are you qualified, but should I pay you money to be my coworker? Can I depend on you? So we're going to go over this real quick. Exams, when you graduate, GPA. Can't stress that enough. Please, those 3 things on the top all the time. Next is technical skills. What programming languages or computer software do you have experience in? Work experiences. Primarily experiences where you've applied some of the knowledge that you've acquired through your exams and classes. And then your leadership and volunteer. How have I worked in teams? What leadership roles have I taken on? What things have I done that I really want to talk about? And this is the last thing I'll say before I open it up to questions, but it's really the transition. Your resume will be the template for your interview. That's what it is. It's you saying, hey, recruiter, this is what I want to talk about. So with that, we'll open it up to questions. Some of you will be able to see there's a Q&A button at the bottom. So if you text questions in there, I'll be happy to answer them. Otherwise, you can raise your hand. And I'll warn you, there's 2 people raising their hand right now. I don't know if you guys meant to do that, but I will call on you if your hands are still raised. So I saw Tom Moore's hand went up, so I'm going to allow him to ask a question here.
Hello.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yep.
What's your question?
So kind of back to the idea of experience. So I'm a sophomore myself, and I obviously have no internships in my past or any jobs of that in my past. But on my resume, I have pretty much every job I've done, which is like, tons of high school manual labor jobs. Do you think that is, until I get an internship, it's good to keep that on there, or kind of start minusculing that?
Like I said before, I think it's important that you have something on there that shows you work. I think any work experience is better than no work experience. what I mean by that when I say it's better to have applied experience is, as you're thinking about how you're going to spend your time, like say you don't get an internship this summer for the actual world, and you're trying to figure out what you want to do next summer, taking an opportunity to find some type of applied experience will serve you better at finding a full-time job and continuing to go back to that same work. But in general, I would keep that any work experience on there, unless you have so much on your resume that you're running out, just to show that, you know, I have work, or I continue to work as I look for jobs. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, and kind of along with that real quick, I've heard this a lot, that you don't want your resume to be longer than a page. Is that something that really I should focus on?
Do not send me a resume that's more than one page.
All right.
Does that help you out?
Yep.
All right, thanks, Tom. I am gonna Millie, your hand's up, so I'm gonna allow you to talk. Hey, Millie, are you there? I'm guessing Millie is not here. So how about Ilana?
Hi, I had a question about the skills section. So for my skills section, I've only worked with Python really. So that's kind of like my first bullet, but then I have like 2 soft skills. Would you say not to put any soft skills on your resume, or what would you fill the skills section with generally?
Why don't you give me some examples that might help me out?
Like soft skills are just what I put for my technical skills.
If you have experience doing something really specific, so for example, let's say that you did competitive Toastmasters, then I think maybe public speaking might be an example that you put on there. But like communication, initiative, attention to detail, I would say things like that. What I really would rather see is applications, examples of it. So like if I take initiative and I'm a hard worker, I'm like, okay, well, you better have a really high GPA, because people that work hard and have attentions to detail generally have high GPAs. If you say I have great leadership skills and conflict resolution, well, maybe you're an RA or you've taken executive board seats. Like I want to see examples of how you've applied things more than I want to hear whether you think you have it or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Mohammed.
Hi, Charles.
How's it going?
Thank you for hosting this. One of the questions I had is, I think most of us students, we've heard about the TIA Infinite Actuarial course. That's something that is very, I guess, out there. It's people love to learn about the skill sets that actuaries use. How should we explicitly state it in our resume? Should we just say, beginner to advanced functions in SAS, SQL, Excel, or should we say, or should we include some of the projects that we've done with the course, or should we say that from these skills that I've learned, I created this project or I did this type of project in my resume? So, I just want to understand how we should explicitly put that out there in our resume.
Okay, first of all, great question. A lot to unpack there. So we'll start with the course. So the technical skills course, excellent resource. I am increasingly seeing a higher percentage of actuarial candidates take it. I love to see that anytime you're doing self-training, using technical skills, the actuarial backing for it kind of puts it even a step above a regular class. So just props to you. Encourage everyone on the call, please do something similar. So the first question is, let's see, beginner, intermediate, advanced. My general rule of thumb is I would be astounded if candidates could accurately tell their skill level. I've had people say like they're intermediate in a programming language, and then they met someone who was advanced, and they're like, oh no, I'm a beginner. I basically assume every candidate's really a beginner, unless you're like a double major in computer science. So I wouldn't worry so much about listing your skill level. I would you can go generic with the list. And then for projects, so like I would list, for technical skills, I think putting something like I completed the TIA course, that's a good place to start. I think that's a worthwhile thing putting in your experience, or putting in your skills to say, hey, here's some validation that I really know this. And like I said, it's a step above because it's an initiative I think you're taking. If you finished projects in those courses and you don't have a robust set of experiences or projects in your work experience section, I think you can add some projects there. Again, your resume says, here's a demonstration of why I'm qualified and I want to talk about it.
Okay.
So if you're going to put this, like I did a project here, like, yeah, okay, good. He's got some application. What I'm really going to look for then in the screening interview is like, I want to know about it. Do you actually understand what you did? Can you talk about it? Can you explain it in a way that I understand that demonstrates your competency in it? So you're fine including it, but if it was something really simple or really basic where it doesn't really demonstrate a lot of knowledge, I would be a little hesitant. But that's kind of, I would separate it. The course itself should go in the technical skills section. Projects that you've done with those, you can put in the experience section as, here's a specific project that I kind of want to talk about, which is a little different than skills, if that makes sense.
Understood.
Does that answer all your questions there?
Understood. Yes. There's the skills cut in the skills course. You write down the skills that you've learned, and then in the experience work section, you can write down some projects you've done with that.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more person with their hand up. Jamal.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson.
How's it going?
All right. So I have a quick question regarding GPA and the criteria that you consider. So for instance, in medical school, they'll often factor in your science GPA. I don't want to say exclusively, but it's heavily weighted compared to your overall GPA. Now, would that be similar in the field of actuarial science where mathematics is the primary bend, or is it purely consideration of overall GPA? Or should we even specify we should just provide our overall GPA, even if the math GPA were to be higher?
That's a good question. I don't feel too strongly one way or the other. Maybe if your major and your overall GPA are really different, like you didn't do well your freshman year, your gen eds, but you excelled in your major classes after that. I would stick to one GPA in your resume. And I would say that for me personally, I can't speak to all recruiters here. I would weight the overall GPA more than your major specific. For me, math competency is demonstrated by passing exams. The GPA, on the other hand, is more, do you have good attention to detail? Are you motivated to do well at everything, even if you don't like it or you aren't very good at it? So I tend to favor overall GPA over major. But I wouldn't say that there is necessarily a right way to do it. Does that answer your question, Jamal?
Yeah, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
Good question. So we have some questions and answers here. I will try to answer a couple of them. Okay. Megan Whitney. Hi, Megan. I am sorry that I am scary and intimidating. Where would you recommend including any honors or awards on a resume? That's a great question. So I think that would be a section right at the bottom. Dean's lists and things like that are fine. Honors Society, all that's fine. But for me, standouts for honors and awards would be things like winning a speech competition for Toastmasters or winning a case competition for a company. That would be real highlights. But other things that you just think that kind of demonstrate you're a well-rounded person, or maybe you have some special accomplishment in the mathematics field. I would list those at the very bottom of the resume. And if that doesn't answer your question, you can submit another one. Oh, sorry, someone messaged me directly. Zach said, would a high school computer science internship be viewed as valuable? So a general rule of thumb is you don't include things from high school. Personally, I would include it. If you're a freshman or a sophomore, I would include it. If you're a junior or senior, I would hope that you have some additional level of computer science to talk about, having taken courses or done a project, or maybe have a minor in it. But I think that's a computer science internship would be at least interesting to include on your resume. And I see Zach raised his hand. I'm going to answer the other Q&A and then I'll get to you, Zach. Does that sound fair? I have 4 exams passed and 1 internship. However, I graduated in December of 2018. Should I be applying for full-time positions? That's tough. So in general, most non-entry level positions want a year to 2 years of experience. Not landing a full-time job out of college, and I'm just going to read between the lines and say that there's probably something unusual about the circumstance of getting an internship and not a full-time and still looking right now. I think 4 exams generally demonstrates it's pretty robust resume builder for an entry-level job. I would be applying for full-time positions. There are positions in the field that are just starting to grow. Northwestern Mutual was one of the first. That's where I currently work. We have something called the postgraduate internship program, where students who are non-traditional or found the profession later still have an opportunity to get in. So if you can find a unique position like that, that's what I would go for. But I think you'd have an extremely hard time finding an internship given that you're already post-graduation. So yeah, I would continue pursuing full-time positions given the information I have available. When is the deadline for applying for an internship? If I am planning on doing an exam in October, will this affect my chances of getting an internship? Absolutely. So when you apply, right now until October, right now until November. But me personally, I didn't get my first internship until January. But all of the experience I've had in the recruiting world says that's a pretty unusual thing to happen. What I would do is I would send some resumes out now. And then the moment you get results back in October, I would apply more or again. I think even if you put on your resume that you're sitting in October, that's a good kind of leg in that you're on your way there. If it's your first exam, I might wait a little while and see if you can pass your exam first. But yeah, that's a tough one. There are definitely companies who will have most of their positions filled, or at least have their candidates in the pipeline by the middle of October. But there are definitely companies that will still be looking at the end of October. So if it's your first exam, I would wait until you sat. If you already have an exam and that'll be your second one, then I would just say you're sitting in October and I would start applying for jobs. That was from Anonymous. So hopefully that answered your question. All right, Zach, we'll open it up to you. How's it going, Zach?
Hi, Mr. Johnson. I'm going pretty good. No, I'm a freshman here, and I had done an IT internship where I was paid through high school. But I also have experience in Java, JavaScript, C++, and now R in my first semester. And I was just wanting to – I know you'd said that not to list anything from high school, but that's still a pretty valuable thing to list on there, no?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you're a freshman, that's outstanding. I
And
would,
then
I would absolutely include that. I might even include that next year,
Okay.
because that's going to help you out a lot. And just to be clear, you're an actuarial science student.
Yes.
That's a fantastic start to your actuarial career. Pass an exam or 2 exams this year, and you'll move right to the top of the list of a screening interview. So remember, there's 3 parts to this presentation. This is just the resume part, but I'm telling you, Zach, that's a killer resume to have. That's a ton of technical experience to have your freshman year.
Another question about experience to put on there.
Yeah.
For like a design competition, if I were like, say you win like a product design competition, that's still something that you'd want to see for leadership, correct?
By product design, you mean like building something technical?
I was on a team of 5 people, and I was one of the finalists for NASA's design competition this year.
Were you on a team, or did you do it by yourself?
It was a team, but mostly myself.
I would guess that that's better application of skills than it is necessarily leadership. And I'll just say from your answer, when you list leadership or team building parts of your resume, it's not that, ooh, this qualifies. It's, I have robust examples of when I was a quality leader. And I'll caveat this when we're bleeding into the next part of it, but a leader is someone who gets other people to act. A leader isn't someone who takes responsibility, right? We can all take on a ton of responsibility by ourselves. A leader is someone who gets other people to act. That's what a leader does. And we'll talk about some good and bad examples of questions for that. And Zach, I'll just say, well, wait till we get through the next section. And then I think we can talk about what qualifies as leadership or team building skills. I would say that sounds like a work experience where you have some technical application, where you can talk about the technical skills, how you applied them, and in a way that demonstrates you have strong communication and understanding. Does that answer your question for now, Zach?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good question. Super cool. If we weren't having a giant live panel, I would love to hear more. Okay. I think we have one more Q&A. Similar to the TIA skills course, are there any other online technical courses or computer science courses that you like to see on resumes? There's nothing specific. And frankly, I think if you just go to YouTube and decide you want to build something in a language you've learned, that you can build some pretty robust resume building things without anything too technical or specific. So I'll give you an example. In hindsight, I don't think I put this on my resume, but it's interesting. So I took a Java course and I played Super Smash Brothers. I founded the Super Smash Brothers club at my college. And one of the things I did was I built a Java program that cataloged all the games and the people who played it and stored it in a text-based database, and then could call that database, do a variety of analytics, and then output it to a user through a graphic user interface. I took no courses for it. I did all the Googling and building myself. It was no, hey, you need to have it done by this date, or I had some end goal that I was trying, or some problem to solve. But I self-taught myself. It was something that I was motivated to do, and I could demonstrate that I can apply the technical skills that I had learned to build something in a way that if I were given a work project, I could leverage those same skills to build something on the job, which is really, again, what we're trying to get at when we talk about when we're going through the interview process. So I'll just pause for 1 minute. I think we answered all of the Q&A online. Zach, your hand is still up. I don't know if you want me to call on you again, but I'll just pause for 1 minute before we move on. Everyone good? Resumes, everyone's I'm taking notes, ready to have an awesome resume for recruitment season. Excellent. Okay. So now I want to talk about screening interviews. Screening interviews are probably the most important part. They're, certainly the widest funnel is at the resume review part, where we review a lot of resumes, and we don't necessarily call a lot of people. But the resume is very technical and formulaic. There's a very specific set of things that we look for on resumes. The screening interview is not so distinct. Like, oh, they said X, Y, and Z, so they get to the next round. Or they didn't say A, B, C, so they're not getting to the next round. The screening interview is our way of evaluating, are you full of it? That's frankly 90% of the screening interview. See, we know what qualifications and skills you need to do the job. We're recruiters, we've been doing this for a while. So when we look at your resume and it says, oh, look, you know, here are the things that we think qualify you. The screening interview is, did they just put it on there to be a resume builder? Oh, that falls under the leadership position. Or did they actually take responsibility and do something? Oh, I built this project in R. Okay, well, what did you build? What were the results? What were the mathematical analysis that you went through? Where did you get your data? Did you have to clean it? How credible was it? Did you use it to predict anything? What we really want to do is take this essentially structure of, here are the list of things that qualify me to do the job that you're hiring me for, and we're going to try to really discern, did you do those things? And do they actually demonstrate the skills that we need? And so we'll break it down into a couple different sections like before with the resume. When we look through those things in the resume and then we kind of probe into them. So the first ones are usually around work experience. What I hear career services tell students, and I actually like this, is they call it the STAR method. I'm assuming some of you have heard of the STAR method. I still don't remember what the T stands for in STAR, which means it's probably not super important. So we'll just call it the SAR method, S-A-R. I think it's a really good fundamental way to think about how you're going to structure the answers to your questions. So S is situation. Every question basically is a tiny story about yourself. And your stories need to follow this formula. You need to tell me the situation you were in. What was the context around the technical project that you had? What drove you to be in this leadership position or take on this project or idea you have? What was the conflict you dealt with in a group? Describe the situation. Who were the important players? Did your boss give you something? You know, and we'll kind of walk through an example or two. What's the situation? What's the action you took? What did you actually do? Task, action. See, T and A are basically the same things. Thank you. Situation, action. What did you do? So here's the situation I'm in. Here's what I decided to do. Here's the action that I decided to take. You know, I sat down with them to resolve the conflict, or I decided I was going to do some research because I wasn't quite sure what my boss was asking, or you know, I failed an exam, so I went and I found new study resources, and I went and consulted with people who did well. That's my action. So what's the situation? What's my action? And this is the area where I think a lot of students struggle in their screening interview, is talking about the result. You know, we were in conflict over here. I sat down and we talked it out. Okay, but did things get better? Did you actually resolve the conflict? Well, I wanted to lead this thing. We set it all up. Okay, but did people show up? Did you raise money? You know, I solved this technical problem. I did a whole bunch of research and built it. But did your boss like it? Was this what they were asking for? And so as we think through some of these questions on a screening interview, think about what you want to say. A general rule of thumb I have for students is have 5 back pocket stories. 5 back pocket stories that answer the 3 fundamental things we keep talking about. A technical application, a leadership example, and then the last one is like conflict. And so we'll dive into these a little bit. One of the really interesting questions that that we talk a lot about is that is super common from screening interviews, particularly from HR, is tell me a time that you had to deal with conflict. So the most common answer I get, and this, by the way, is like it's almost immediately a no when I get this answer, but it is by far the most common answer I get to this question. Tell me a time you had to deal with conflict. And remember, I'm interviewing actuaries, right? So we're a bit of a monolith. So this is a very common situation, right? I was in a group project. We all have group projects all the time with strangers, right? Not always our friends. We're assigned to random groups. Prime situation for conflict to arise. Tell me a time that you had to deal with conflict. I was in a group project and, surprise, someone wasn't pulling their weight. I know, it's astounding. It's astounding. So situation, this is the action that I hear people take that I am just so disappointed for. Someone wasn't pulling their weight. So I worked extra hard so that we could still get a good grade. That answer is the opposite of conflict resolution. That's conflict avoidance. And I want to dive a little deeper into this because it kind of gets at what the screening interview, what the whole process is trying to do. We're trying to evaluate whether you're going to be good on the job. I think that's the fundamental disconnect between most of the education system and the message I'm trying to get to you. The goal is not to be successful in an academic setting. The goal is to be successful in a professional setting. And in a professional setting, you're going to have to deal with conflict sometimes. And if you work extra hard and avoid those hard conversations, your work ends up being less efficient. And it makes it ripe for the opportunity to have bad relationships. One of the books that leaders in the corporate world are asked to read is something called Crucial Conversations, which is just fundamentally about being able to have difficult, open conversations with the people you work with when there's conflict. And so if you are someone who just constantly avoids conflict and is willing to work twice as hard, twice as long, just so they don't have to have those conversations, it's kind of an indicator that you might have issues when it comes to working in groups or working with a diverse set of people with diverse backgrounds, diverse talents, diverse job responsibilities. Your ability to get along with a group and resolve conflict is going to be fundamental to you being successful. And frankly, this is one of the questions that I think is the hardest to address as a college student. College isn't necessarily the place where conflict resolution is taught or promoted. And there's not always situations where you can effectively resolve conflict. In college, you can just leave a group of friends. So when we talk about that leadership section, that's one of the robust areas that you can differentiate yourself. If you can take on responsibilities of groups or of teams and help resolve when people don't get together, it doesn't even have to be a conflict where you don't get along with someone. The best answers for conflict resolution I have ever gotten have always been from RAs, because their job is to resolve conflicts of people on the floor. And they're literally trained to do it. They're one of the few groups of people. So think about that as you go through your resume, or you're thinking about what you want to do this year that you think will prepare you to get a job. A lot of people talk about technical skills, passing exams, good GPAs, good experience, but rarely do they talk about how do you develop the soft skills, and not just develop them, but apply them in a way that you can describe it in a concise couple minute story. Right? You have 3, 4, 5 minutes to answer my question. And you have to demonstrate at the end of that answer that you can resolve conflict. So having condensed single examples, those back pocket stories, end up playing out super valuably in your interviews. So that's one. How do you deal with conflict? Tell me about that. Another one that I've found a lot, this is, by a wide margin, the most important one when it comes to the actuarial profession, which is tell me about a time that you worked on a project or you had to apply some technical skill. Now there are variations what if you weren't given very good direction? So how do you deal with ambiguity? Or what if it wasn't received well? So how do you deal with essentially not doing super well? But I think fundamentally what it gets down to is do you understand the concept? And can you communicate it? You know, fundamentally, what differentiates actuaries that do exceedingly well in their professional world from actuaries who are just really good at actuaries, like being actuaries. And I'd like to caveat that, you know, you can be an incredibly talented actuary, build sophisticated models, design new and innovative products that are highly profitable. But unless you can convince the corporate wheel to turn in the way that you think is the right direction, it doesn't matter how technically or philosophically, you know, talented you are. Really, it comes down to, can you explain those technical concepts to non-technical people? So when you're thinking about what are the projects I've worked on, don't always explain them in actuarial terms. Practice talking or explaining things to people who might know nothing about what actuarial science is. That is a great way to practice. Am I actually communicating effectively in a way that can be understood? And a lot of those interviews, you know, like I said, we interview resumes that I'm qualified, but if you can't communicate that to us, then I don't think you're going to be successful in the job, because a lot of the, you know, the predication of being successful is being able to explain your work. If I know the right answer, but I can't tell you what it is, what good is the fact that I know? That's another one where if you're going to put technical things on your resume, and this is the warning I give, like, oh yeah, I did this project, and then I ask them a question, I'm like, okay, well, what were the results? I'm like, I don't know, I have to go read it again. Okay, well, if you put it on your resume, and this is the whole screening interview, if there's one thing you take away, your resume is the script for what you want to talk about. So you better have stories for every single item on that list. Good stories. So that's leadership, and that's technical skills, that's conflict resolution. Last one's leadership. I don't think actuaries are always the best at evaluating leadership in screening interviews. I think it's a confluence of the people who do recruiting rarely are in leadership positions. Usually they're between 3 and 7 years in their career, so they're usually closer to the technical side. Two, most actuaries don't move up the leadership chain. Maybe if you go to consulting world, you'll deal with clients, or if you go to the corporate world, you might move up into to manage some small projects. But most of it, most of your ability to be successful will be determined by how smart you are, how technically competent you are, and whether you can communicate that intelligence and technical competence. However, I think leadership really can be a game changer when it comes to interviewing and when it comes to being successful on the job. And so the way I like to describe leadership is that there's really two things that you want to demonstrate in your examples and in your answers. The first one is like having vision and initiative. What we traditionally think of leaders are. Leaders are like, I see something that I want to happen, so I go work to make it happen. But I think that's what leaders aspire to. Successful leaders drive results. So I aspire to do this. Do I get other people to act? I aspire to raise money. Do I actually get people to give? So when you put leadership examples in organizations, say vice president of the Actuarial Club or president of my sorority, think about when someone asks me about that, what are the 2 or 3 things that I can say, here is something I did in that position that I'm proud of? And not did I do it, but I can tell you the story of how I got it done that demonstrates that I convinced other people to act, and I can deal with problems, and I can communicate things of why it's important to people. And I was detail oriented enough, and I worked hard enough that I covered all of the bases. I built a website. I came up with a marketing plan. I thought about a lot more details than just the technical ones. I could solve what to do, but also who I had to work with and how I got them motivated. And I think if you can really capitalize on those 3 things, the ability to deal with and resolve conflict, the ability to answer really technical questions in a way that non-technical people can understand, and demonstrate leadership where you got other people to act and you had vision and initiative, I think you'll generally knock it out of the park for a screening interview. Before I open it up to questions, and for the record, this section that we go to for Q&A is almost always the one that has just an enormous amount of questions. And it's really good because it's a very complicated, very diverse experience depending on what companies you're interviewing for. But the screening interview, the most common reason that we don't bring people on, and particularly don't give offers, which we'll talk about in the last one, is uncertainty. You know, we don't know. And so what we're really trying to figure out is answer as many of the uncertainties as we possibly can. And so those 5 stories you have in your back pocket, it'd be great if they could answer 2 or 3 of those questions at the same time, because then it eliminates more uncertainty and demonstrates more skill in shorter amounts of time. 30 minutes goes pretty fast. 4 questions might be all the questions you get. So really think about what stories you want to package together that demonstrate that leadership, that communication, that technical skills, because those will be really what gets you to the final round. And then we'll talk about the final round in a minute, but I will tell you, it's what makes you do really well in the final round is not what most students think. So, Anna, you wanted to share an experience. So I would like you to raise your hand and I'll let you tell everyone about it. How's that? All you gotta do is raise your hand. Well, she might not be here, so I don't want to steal her thunder, but she said she had an interview this past summer for a finance program at Travelers. And when she asked the recruiter after the first interview, and she got a second one, what she could improve on, the recruiter said she had killed it until it came to R, programming language. She said, I needed to expand on it more. Just a real life example of what you talked about. Meaning having the technical skills on there is good, but application is such a huge difference maker. Okay, so we'll open it up to questions. Same thing as last time, you can raise your hand. I'll click on you, I'll let you speak if you want to. We have a couple Q&A directly from the board. So Mohammed, question or situation, task, action, result, yeah. Anonymous attendee said, I've also heard it called the CAR method. That could be. I'm not 100% sure. But I'm guessing it ends with action and result. Great things to focus on. What type of involvement in leadership roles do you look for? I'm partial. President of the Actuarial Club is a standout for me. It's one of the things that'll move you to the top of the resume pile. Yeah, any leadership in relevant organizations. It's like one of the interesting ones I've seen recently is like joining the finance committee for the university. So you actually work on like allocating funds and budgeting. It's a great thing where you're dealing with conflict and answering questions. Treasurer roles are fine. I see that that's a pretty common one in actual resumes. Again, it's far less about what the role was and far more about what you did with it. So if you have 1 or 2 leadership examples, I'm like, okay, I should give them a call. But my questions are going to be, what did you do? What did you do in that role that you're proud of that, you think you want to talk about? So leadership in college organizations is good. Voluntary ones outside of college are fine. I don't often see the responsibility levels as a college student in those. Sometimes they're good, but rarely do I, at least in the interviews I have, no one ever talks about their volunteer involvement outside of the college organization. So finding leadership board opportunities on campus, I'd say are probably your best bet. Okay. Questions? Someone's got to raise their hand. Come on. This. Yeah, I mean, you guys get unabashed, honest answers from a recruiter. So if you're going into recruitment season, You can ask me. All right, Daniel, you're on.
All right. So I'm a freshman and I'm majoring in actuarial science. Do you think it'd be can you advise me to start to like immediately minor in computer science, or what about that?
Okay, great question. So I'd say there's one or two things to consider there. The first one is, and this is a common question that I get, is should I graduate early or should I stay for an extra semester? Because I think that's a bit of the answer to the question. And my answer is you will work for 40 years as an actuary. You're going to make plenty of money over your career. Taking an extra semester or an extra year in school will not be a detriment to you in the hiring process. I took a semester off and worked at a leadership academy in Mexico. I graduated in 5 years. I don't think there's any real, oh man, they're graduating extra fast. That might be a little bump, but I've never seen that affect the hiring decision. So the earlier you start working on computer science, the better off you'll be. So I guess simply put, I would absolutely recommend you just taking the computer science minor, adding it on right now and starting to work towards it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good question. Other questions? All right, Megan, hold on. All right, go ahead, Megan.
Hello, hi. So I was wondering, in terms of the screening interview, do you think that it would be better for those back pocket stories to be versatile enough to kind of answer maybe some different topics, to kind of like address leadership and technical skills, or would it be more beneficial to have more individualized examples in our back pocket?
Great question, Megan. Definitely better to answer multiple. Anytime you can demonstrate that, I can deal, so for example, if you were in a group project building a computer program or a data science, or you're analyzing something and you have to deal with conflict in that group and you still manage to get to a good result. The other thing is so when you get to the final round interview, having a couple stories that can answer different questions will end up paying off really, really well. So let's back up. Simply put, answering more than one is better. What I usually find is that 5 stories is usually a challenging number for students to get to. So Megan, if you're like, man, I got like 10 stories and I'm trying to figure out which 5 I should stick to, yeah, the 5 that answer more than one question is definitely going to be a better group. But those 5 back pocket questions, you'll generally repeat them once or twice through the interview process. So if they can answer more than one question, that'll really pay dividends when you get to the second round interview. But does that answer your question, Megan?
Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Who else? Oh, we have some Q&A online. I think I missed. Oh. If someone you are interviewing appears nervous, does that matter to you as long as they answer your question successfully? Ooh, okay. That's a tough one. You would think that there'd be a generic answer, like, yeah, confidence matters, or no, it doesn't matter. We just want to know if you're good. I think first it'll vary from interviewer to interviewer. I tend to be a bit more empathetic with people who are nervous, particularly if I think that they're doing pretty well and they're just kind of hard on themselves and they hold themselves to high standards. But regardless of whether you intentionally judge someone for that, confidence generally benefits you. Now you can be like cocky and overconfident, and I've absolutely seen people come through where that's been a major detriment. But for the most part, confidence bodes really well. I think people with confidence do better. And I'll even take this one step further. One of the pieces of advice that I like to give students is you generally don't want your dream job to be your first interview. Interviewing, like, you know, you gotta shake it off and get comfortable doing it. It's kind of challenging. So I advise students to go and apply for insurance broker positions. So it's a sales position, and you're going to get interviewed by salesmen. You probably don't want to take the job at the end. I mean, you might. I mean, it's a fantastic way to really dive deep into the industry. But they're almost always willing to interview people because they're looking for candidates. They're going to be pretty personable, and so it's a great way to kind of get comfortable with the process of the interview and asking off-the-cuff questions. So to answer your question, I think answering the question successfully is more important, but you know, I think confidence helps you out. And we won't dive into too much about being cocky, but we will talk a little bit about that as we talk about what really drives someone to be successful in the second round. Where can I get an actuarial science major? Steven Steinberg answers, that is a fantastic question. So if you go out, there is a list of things called Centers of Actuarial Excellence. And they're a list of schools that have passed pretty rigorous standards to be qualified to teach people in actuarial science. So one of them, you know, a couple that come to mind are like Drake, University of St. Thomas, University of Madison, University of Illinois, Illinois State, Nebraska, Michigan, Purdue, Ohio State, highly concentrated in the Midwest, but there's some out in the Northeast and the Southeast as well, not so many on the West Coast. Those are going to be your highest quality ones. But if you go and look at your local colleges, so for example, we're running we're running a recruitment conference in Wisconsin this year. I'll talk about this a little bit at the end about how this came about. But you know, just within 15 or 20 minutes of where I live, there are 5 universities that offer actuarial science majors: University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Carroll, Concordia, University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, Milwaukee School of Engineering. So there's lots of places that you can get an actuarial science major. The Centers of Actuarial Excellence will be big, and a big actuarial science programs like 150 people or more. Smaller programs, you'll get a lot more personal attention. What I will say is my experience says that the biggest differentiating factor is the quality of the head of the program. If it's someone who's very involved, who keeps a good pulse in the industry and has good industry contacts, they'll help their students out a lot. That's one. And the other one is having an active actuarial science club. The best coaches by a wide margin for students are upperclassmen. They've gone through the process. They know the most recent technical things. They go through the same teachers and classes that you do. They've taken exams recently. So if you're looking for majors, you can, generic Center of Actuarial Excellence, but also who's the head of the program? You should probably go meet with them and see if you really like them. And then ask to talk to the president of the actuarial club and just find, do they meet often? Is it active? Because those are 2 big indicators of the strength of the program. I hope that helps, Stephen. Oh my gosh, so many good questions online, but Jamal's got his hand up, so I'm gonna let him ask away. Go ahead, Jamal.
Hello again. Hello.
Oh, we can hear you, Jamal. Go ahead.
Okay. So, now Now, do you factor in what's the significance of being majoring into actuarial science versus being a major of mathematics or of computer science? If you have the technical knowledge necessary to succeed in the field, is there much of a concern what your major is?
No, major doesn't matter nearly as much. Exams are what matter. So like, I don't really judge someone based on their major. I judge whether they've passed exams or not. The exams will demonstrate that you know the actuarial skills necessary to be an actuary. So yeah, like we've hired mathematics and economics double majors. I've hired chemical engineering majors before, but if they have exams passed, they have technical skills and they can talk about it. That's really the important part. So I would focus on exams over what your major is. Does that answer your question, Jamal?
Yep.
Good question. Okay, we'll switch back over to Q&A. So Anonymous asks, if you're a freshman and taking your first exam at the end of the year, is it reasonable to try and get an internship for over the summer? I think it would be extremely unlikely. Like I mentioned, most people, most jobs are landed, most internships particularly are done by the end of October. And I know almost no one who's interviewing, like companies or consulting companies that are interviewing internships in the spring. What I would say is if you're a freshman, is try to take 2 exams before your sophomore year. I don't think it only gets harder to take exams as you get older, just because the demand on your time expands. However, if you're an actual freshman who's passed an exam, you might be able to get some other related internship. I think anytime you have corporate experience, it's really advantageous. And so, getting experience and passing exams is probably the best thing that you can do. But as a freshman, I've never met. I've met one freshman who landed an internship, and it was part-time. It was part of a college company program that was kind of unique. So I think it's unlikely, but shoot for the stars. Okay. Another freshman. I'm a freshman and I have a minor in finance, but was already thinking about minoring in computer science before. The problem is I already have some business classes this semester that wouldn't be useful if I switched. Would you recommend switching still? I already came into college with a lot of credits. So I'll relate back to what I said before. Taking an extra semester in college, one, I think you'll be happy your whole life that you did it. And two, yeah, I think that the difference in performance that I have seen from people who had computer science minors is pretty significant. So it'll really put you a pretty good leg up on not just getting a job, but how well you'll do once you have the job. So yeah, extra business classes, no worries. Graduating a semester late, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Would you recommend applying for internships that are not in your state or nearby? I would highly recommend that. My internship was, so I'll caveat. And then I saw Josh raise his hand. I'll call on Josh. Would you recommend applying for internships in your state? I applied for a lot of internships outside my state because I wanted to see part of the world. And I think that's a great opportunity for an internship. You can kind of feel out another area. Particularly in the given hiring market, I would be a little more sensitive in that that is going to be a place where you're hoping to get a job offer. So if you apply and get an internship out of state, but you're probably never going to live there and you have another opportunity to work in state, I would at least put some thought into, I want to secure a full-time position. But for the most part, if you have an internship and you get an offer and you turn it down, you're probably pretty competent and you'll be able to get a full-time position anyway. So I would say, personally, yeah, take an internship outside of the state, experience a different culture, a different company, a different life, see if that's something that you're going to want to do. Beyond just landing a job at college is where, an opportunity to really explore and to grow. And internships are going to be a great way to get a lay of, you know, what's consulting like, or corporate, or what's P&C versus life health. So I would recommend it. All right, Josh. You're up, Josh. How can I help you?
Hi. How helpful do you think an MBA would be in a career in actuarial science?
I think you should consider getting it. So there's two reasons that you get an MBA. The first one is you've attained your fellowship and you want to move up in management. So that means you graduated with your undergraduate, you got a full-time job, you spent the next 3 to 5 years passing exams, you got fully credentialed, and then you went back to school part-time and got your higher education paid for and got your MBA. That's one. The only other reason I really recommend MBAs is if you are a late entrant to the actuarial science profession or like education program. So like, particularly if you're like a transfer student from a community college and you didn't know all the requirements, so you're kind of a year or two behind everyone else. I think getting an MBA so that you meet the qualifications for an intern by going back to school, that's sometimes worthwhile. Does that answer your question, Josh?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah, good question though. And then I see Danielle or Daniel here. Go ahead, Daniel.
I just wanted to know if there were any more topics you wanted to discuss after this, or is this the final Q&A session? Or like
No,
the final, you know.
after this.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
And I've lost my, I hit two buttons. Can you guys hear me still?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. My Zoom is funny, but I will continue answering questions. So what other internships, if not actuarial, would look good on a resume? So that's a great question. Insurance ones are good. Like anytime you have like data science, where you got to work with large data sets or any type of software like R or something like that, that's usually really good. Anytime you're in insurance, so underwriting ones are pretty good. You get to learn about insurance products and how things work. Anytime you get to work with, like claims is another one in the insurance industry. But just in general, like anytime that you can do corporate, like just the corporate world, to demonstrate that you work in a corporate environment, you understand how that works, and you're able to excel. And anytime you can talk about specific projects or pieces of knowledge that demonstrate you learned something when you were on the internship and can explain it. I hope that answers your question. But yeah, data science is a big one. Computer science is another one. But just general insurance ones, finance, things like that, banking. Those are all good resume builders, good experiences. Would not majoring in an actuarial science rank someone lower than those who do not have an actuarial science major, even if they are taking exams and are part of the actuarial club at their college? No, I don't think it really makes any difference. Final interviews, but how is, so this question is geared towards final interviews. So the question is, how important is connections and connecting with members of the company when they make their final decisions? That is a great question. And I will say that it's very important. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to the second round interviews. But that's a very good question. Do you have any advice for career changers? I majored in aerospace engineering. Kevin, you sound awesome. and have worked in finance, but I'm trying to break into the field. I'm sitting for my first exam in October, and I'm trying to figure out if I should be aiming for an internship or a full-time position. So at Northwestern Mutual, we started our postgraduate intern program specifically because it's so difficult for career changers. And what we found is people, particularly people who have strong technical skills that switch professions, bring a lot of additional skills to the table that prove out to be really, really valuable for companies. So my advice is it's going to be challenging. I would reach out to professional organizations like the Society of Actuaries or the Actuary Society and start making connections there. I think any way you can get into some of those insurance or actuarial professional organizations and start networking there, they might be able to help guide you at what opportunities are available. And I'll just speak to my company, which is Northwestern Mutual. We do post-grad hiring in the summer. So I think you said, Kevin, you're taking your first exam in October. If you have 2 exams and you haven't found anything come next summer, I highly encourage you to come and apply at Northwestern Mutual. Great program. And we do hire out of it, so it's a great opportunity to get a full-time position as well. I am currently a sophomore looking to take my first exam. Good choice. When would be an ideal time to have it done by? That way I can apply for an internship next year. Before August. And Haley, my general rule of thumb is just take them as soon as you can. Take them, don't skip sittings. You're going to be taking exams for 5 to 10 years. It's a lifestyle that you're going to get used to. So when I took my first exam, it was between my 3rd and 4th year in school because I had switched majors. And I passed it in August, and I passed 4 more exams in the next 15 months. I just didn't skip sittings. And so my advice is always sit, take as little time between them as you can, and then try sitting for the next one. The other thing I'll add is a twofold. One, the vast majority of exams that you take in your life will be done completely on your own materials, your own coursework. So if you're depending on or waiting for a college class to start studying for an exam, I would challenge you that you can start before it and you can absolutely self-teach yourself. That's one. And then 2, the quality of programs like Coaching Actuaries is just so robust. So everyone on this call, if you're taking an exam, use Coaching Actuaries. It's an absolutely standout tool. But leverage the technology and opportunities you have and try to take exams as soon as you can. And personally, it tends to move people up the stack if I see 2 exams in under 6 months, if you can pass 2 exams in under 6 months. So I hope that helps. One more question. For seniors graduating this spring, is it a good idea to apply to summer internships along with full-time jobs, or should we focus on only full-time? That is a great question. Full-time is where you're going to get the most opportunity. It doesn't hurt to apply to internships, but like I said, most companies, I know Northwestern Mutual, State Farm, where I used to work, we don't take interns unless they're going back to school. So maybe if you're getting a master's or you're extending for a semester because you want to get your comp sci minor or something, that might make you eligible for an intern, but just make sure that's all on your resume. So I hope that helps. All right, so don't see any other hands up, don't see any other Q&A. So let's dive into the last part, which is the final round interview. Someone asked a good question, which was, what does it take? Do you need people to like you? Does that play a big factor? The way I like to describe the final round interview is, do I want to go to work and sit next to you every day? if I leave work for a week and go on vacation, can I trust you to pick up my projects and do them? Can I trust you that the reports that you build and you pass to me are accurate? And so a lot of the final round interview is about, do you fit in? So it's not uncommon for me to see people come into second round interviews and be really nervous. So what I always tell students is you're already qualified. You're already qualified for the job. We know that from your resume and your screening interview. What we're trying to figure out is, do you fit in well here? Now, that's not to say that there aren't, qualifications that we try to figure out. So a lot of times, I say we try to reduce uncertainty. If there are things that were left uncertain in a screening interview, we'll send that to the second round team and say, hey, we didn't really get too much depth in their interpersonal skills, or we didn't get too much depth in their technical skills or their industry understanding. So that's really an opportunity for us to dive into the areas you're weak on. So if you know that there's something weak on your resume, be prepared for second round interviews to ask it. But the most part is just, do you get along with everyone who's there? Do you, if you're working a consulting job, do you have a high priority on your work and getting things done timely? If you work at a mutual job with low turnover, do you have high growth aspirations? Do you want to pursue your fellowship? Do you want to, do you want to stick around at a company for a long time? So the thing I challenge people to do in the final round interview is, one, really take some time to figure out, things about that company. It's twofold. Like, one, you might work there for a long time. Like, you're going to want to know if that's the kind of place that you'll be happy. But two, it is astounding how much difference research about a company can make when you come into an interview. When I moved to Wisconsin, I went and I read financial statements and balance sheets for year-end accounting. And I backed into, oh, look, this must be a line that they do a lot of business on, or, here's some new product that they launched in the market. I'll definitely make sure to ask questions about that and how they went through and priced it, or, this product is their bread and butter. So I'm going to go read up on it and see, where do they sell it? How do they sell it? Who does it get sold to? So really just take some time to research the companies that are interviewing you, but also use that as a chance to interview the company. So what I'll say is a killer of an interview, like it's a huge turn off for me, is anytime we get to the end of the interview and we say, do you have questions? And they say, no. How could you have no questions for me? You don't know what I want to do on a daily basis. You don't know what kind of software I use. You don't want to know how I enjoy my boss, or what the culture here is like, or how often I go home at 5 o'clock. Like, you have no questions for me? Like, you should have hours worth of questions. And not just about things that you've pre-written before, but you just had an honest conversation with an actuary who currently works at the company. You should have, 3 or 4 questions purely based on a conversation you've already had. Oh, you said you work in this space. Can you tell me more about it? Oh, you're on investments. How is investments different than other actuarial rotations? Do you like it there? Oh, you're in a rotation program. What's it like rotating every year? Do you wish it was, faster or slower? Do you think that the company is ever going to change its policy? Oh, what's the internship program like? How long has it been going around? Like, there should just be 100 questions that you can ask at any given interview. And you want to ask as many as you can. It's going to make you look better, but you really, truly want to just dig in and try to understand the place that you're trying to work, in exactly the same way that we're trying to dig in and figure out what kind of person you would be if we chose to bring you in. So it's way more like dating in the final round than it is in the screening interviews or when you're building your resume. Do we get along? Are we interested in similar things? I used to kind of scoff at the idea that, like, oh, notice something in someone's office and talk about it. But I'm telling you, I've had bosses that, like, if you saw a Pittsburgh Steeler helmet and you asked them about the Steelers, they'd talk for 15 minutes about it. Like, a lot of it is just, can you be conversational and get along with people? And I know that that might be a bit tense, but that not everyone thinks that that is how you should hire people. But I can tell you from experience that being in offices where people got along, they were both happier and far more productive. And I don't think that I think that that's something worth pursuing. And so relax in the second round interview. You're qualified. You're absolutely qualified. You can whip out your 5 stories in your back pocket again. But really take this as an opportunity to dig in and try to understand what it might be like to work there. I mean, especially if you're interviewing at 2 or 3 different places, compare. This place talked for 15 minutes or for like 5 consecutive interviews about this program. I wonder if this other company I'm interviewing has anything similar to it. So that, I mean, the way you kill a second, or the way you do really well in a second round interview is you ask a lot of questions. And the most common thing that I saw got people rejected that was consistent was being inauthentic. Having 10 cookie cutter answers to various questions, only giving answers that are in your back pocket, it makes you come off as really inauthentic. And the second round interview, we just want to know who you are. Like, really, sincerely, we just want to know who you are. And so try to be yourself. Like, you don't have to pretend. I know a lot of times in interviews you feel like you have this imposter syndrome. Maybe you're dressed in professional clothes for the first or second time in your life. You're surrounded by these highly qualified professionals that are kind of judging you in every word that you say. And that can be really intimidating, but just take a second and remember you're not competing against the people you're interviewing. It's just every other kid that's in that seat feels just the same way you do. So just take a deep breath, say, I only got this far because I'm qualified, and just give sincere answers. I'll give you one other piece of advice here, because I think it's a situation that candidates get into that can be really hard, and then we'll open it up to questions. What happens when you get a question you're not prepared for, or you can't come up with an answer? My advice is take a deep breath. Just stop and take a deep breath. Taking 30 seconds to think about the answer to a question is a really good idea. Take your time. We don't expect things to be off the cuff. And if you take your time and you really think about the answer you want to say, again, it comes off as very authentic. It's not some cookie cutter pre-planned answer. It's you being sincere and being thoughtful about what you want to say and how you want to communicate it. So don't always feel rushed to answer. Just take your time, take a deep breath, think about it, and then don't be afraid to say, I'm struggling to come up with an answer. Can you come back to that question? That's a totally reasonable thing to say. That kind of self-awareness is usually highly valued when it comes to screening interviews or to interviews for full-time or internship positions. So with that, we kind of went through everything. Your resume, that says I'm qualified. Screening interview, are you for real? Are everything you put in this resume, are you really that person? Can you explain that and demonstrate it to me in concise, effective answers? And then the last interview is, first, did we do well in the first 2, which I would say almost all the time, if we really like a candidate coming through, that they make it through the second round. But also, do we get along? Do you fit in here? Are you someone that we want to go to work, that we would trust to do our work, that we would feel, that we would enjoy sitting next to or going to lunch with every day? And would you, in the same way, feel the same coming to work here? Would you feel welcomed, included, supported? Would you be happy? So now we'll open it up to Q&A. And it can be about anything. It doesn't just have to be about second rounds. You can ask me any question for recruitment or the actuarial field. We'll just do a Q&A free-for-all for as long as you guys want. So we have our first question online. Oh, yes. Yeah, new question this year. Will COVID and virtual interviews be super different? Will COVID and virtual interviews be super different? I will start off and say that giving this presentation, which I've given in person for like 5 consecutive years, is pretty different. It's pretty different. I can't see any of your faces. I have no idea if you're laughing at me. But what I'll say is there was a transition to virtual interviews that was happening already. And for screening interviews, I think you get a not quite the same sense as you would in person. Certainly, I think that there was value going to the recruitment fairs. The second round interview, I think, is really the toughest part. It's a bit different. You can have like cues behind your camera. I've noticed a couple people looking and doing things like that. You know, we're pretty empathetic of technical difficulties. So, you know, if someone struggles or something like that, try to avoid it at all costs, but, you know, we understand we're all kind of dealing with it. I'd say the biggest difference is that you don't get to see what a company looks like. Like if you're interviewing for a job out of state or in a different city, you don't get to see what that city's like. You don't get to drive around campus or see what the building's like. When I moved to Wisconsin, when I walked into the Northwestern Mutual headquarters front entrance, I was blown away. I mean, it was a huge selling point for me, that the professionalism and commitment that they had put towards, you know, it was emblematic of all of the other cultural pieces about the company. So from an interviewee perspective, it's probably a bit stranger because you feel less immersed, but it might be a little less intimidating because you'll probably be in a place that you're more comfortable, but it'll probably just be harder to tell if you did well. You can't see all the body language and everything like that. So I'll just say it's different. So hopefully that helps answer your question. Megan's got her hand up, so we'll let her ask away. Go ahead, Megan.
Hi. So I was wondering how beneficial like insurance industry involvement can be when going through the interviewing process. For example, I'm really involved with Gamma Iota Sigma, which is the like insurance and risk management fraternity that we have on campus. And I'm working towards the CLBA business acumen certification. And I was just wondering how beneficial those things might be to bring up during the interview process.
Well, first, good for you. I was a Gamma member. Gamma's a great organization, great way to network, to learn about the diverse set of jobs that there are in the insurance world. You know, a lot of people, we're not really raised in society to understand insurance. So getting that more comprehensive picture of how it works beyond just the technical aspects, it's going to prove really valuable in interviewing. So put it on your resume. But I'll go back to something I said earlier where it's, so if you put it on there, great. Hey, look, they have initiative, they have leadership. I'm going to expect you to talk honestly and accurately about parts of the insurance world. So I think that if you put it on there, particularly if you have some type of certification, think about, what do I want to say if someone asks me about that? Like if you're studying for it right now, what are the things that that are sticking in my mind that I think are going to make me a better actuarial professional? And how am I going to be able to explain that or demonstrate that during an interview? Does that make sense, Megan? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good. That's a good question. Also, great plug for Gamma. Everyone should join Gamma. It's a great organization. I don't see hands up. Okay. What does an average day look like for you? Boy, that's a common question that we get. It varies so incredibly widely. Maybe not incredibly widely. Most actuarial jobs, you will be sitting down in a chair for most of the day, and a lot of your work will be done in Excel. Some jobs, you will work with modeling software. So there's a couple very unique ones out in the field, so like Profit or GGY Access, or TAS was the old one, or MG Alpha. There's some modeling software out there that exists. that you might be working with on a daily basis if you're in the modeling or dividend or maybe in the pricing fields. If you're in studies, you'll probably get to touch SAS or SQL, which are kind of databasing languages. Kind of a lot of that will just be data cleaning, pulling, analyzing, and creating reports. Once the data has been pulled and aggregated, again, it'll probably be dumped into Excel and analyzed there. They're starting to incorporate things like Power BI and Power Queries to help manage some of those larger data sets. But I would say for the most part, it's done in Excel. And I would say initial technical job, if you're consulting, it's probably 90-10 technical meetings. If you're in a corporate world, 80-20. If you're an intern, maybe 70-30. I think a lot of companies, particularly quality companies like Northwestern Mutual, try to add a lot of additional parts to their internship program that give you social aspects to interact with other actuarial interns, other interns in the company, allow you to talk to some of the senior management, chairman's council, things like that. So average day varies a lot, and it changes as you go up the totem pole as well. But for entry-level internship work, expect to work in Excel a lot. You'll probably touch one or two other softwares, writing some VBA code or dealing with data or modeling software. But for the most part, sitting here, looking at spreadsheets, doing analysis, and making reports, I would say it's a pretty average day. Megan, your hand is still up. I'm not 100% sure if you want me to call on you again. So, okay, it went down. I guess that means not. Is it acceptable or encouraged to take notes during interviews? That's fine. As an interviewer, like right now, I start every interview with, hey, there's going to be awkward pauses at the end of every question because I'm going to be taking notes on what you say. So if you just start the interview and say, hey, if I'm looking down, it's just because I'm writing notes about things or things that you said. I will caveat, though, that making eye contact and being conversational probably helps a lot. And there's also probably not an enormous amount that you'll need to take notes on. So definitely nothing wrong with taking notes. Highly encouraged. Shows that you care, particularly in the question and answer section. But maintaining eye contact and trying to be conversational through most of the interview. You just want to make sure that you're present, like mentally present and engaged, and not just it's not a class that you're going to get a test on at the end. It's more an evaluation. So, Megan asked that, so hopefully that answers your question, Megan. Do you think, due to the pandemic, that companies may be more hesitant to hire full-time early in the fall and instead delay hiring until the winter? Absolutely possible. That's absolutely possible. Budget, all that getting finalized and approved, waiting to see how business plays out. I had not thought about that, but when you asked it, that is very true. So be on the lookout. I mean, the companies that I have worked with, and obviously this year because everything's virtual, I haven't been able to talk to other recruiters nearly as much, but no, I think there's a chance that more jobs open up in the wintertime for full-time positions. So it's a good thing to know. Will computers eventually take over actuaries' jobs? So let's think about something. In the 70s, there were no computers used by actuaries, or almost no computers used by actuaries. Most of an actuarial job was just being able to do math accurately, just paper and pencil. And so computers have automated almost all of that, and the demand for actuaries is higher. So at the last annual actuarial conference, an expert in predictive analytics came and talked about how predictive analytics works. I mean, it's a probable event predictor. That's what it does. It says, here is what an event that we think happened is, and here's the probability range with which we think we're accurate. It's talking about a probabilistic and not a certain future. Actuaries are one of the few professions in the world that understand that thought process. So it's not so much that computers will replace actuaries. They might replace a lot of what we do now. I mean, geez, I can't tell you how much is reporting or data management, but what actuaries are uniquely positioned to do is apply the knowledge that computers give us. So understanding probability and uncertainty and the mathematical principles of risk aggregation, and not only understanding how to interpret the data output, what really differentiates data actuaries from like data scientists is we understand this larger economic and financial and regulatory framework. A lot of you guys are going through preliminary exams right now, but when you get up to those fellowship exams, it's applying and understanding how do we take that math and build an actual insurance product? What do regulators care about? What are the rules that we're going to have to abide by? And so I don't think there's any doubt that actuaries will continue to do more of what actuaries do now. But I think that will only increase the demand for actuaries because so few people will know how to utilize and how to build those tools. So I hope that answers your question. If you're a student right now, I would have no worries that computers will make your job obsolete. What notes do recruiters make? Everything. We just try to document your answers, frankly. You know, it's not uncommon for us to have like 6 or 7 interviews in a week and then have a debrief at the end. So the notes that we take are really just cues for our brain. Like, oh, who was that person? Oh yeah, they said, oh, they gave us this answer to this question. That's right. Or we're trying, you know, someone like, oh, I interviewed him in a second round. What did they say in the first round interview for this question? Like, oh, let me go check. So a lot of it is just, you know, some documentation that allows us to recall exactly the conversations we had. It's not like, oh, they looked left twice and up once, which means, you know, X, Y, Z. It's more just us taking notes so that we won't forget what was talked about, what was said. Would you put study abroad experience on your resume? And would you put scholarships you've gotten due to merit on your resume? Yeah, I think study abroad experience is great. Shows independence, intellect. Particularly in a second round, it's something that you can kind of talk about that's interesting and makes you personable. You know, those 5 stories in your back pocket, taking initiative or dealing with uncertainty turn out to be things that are asked pretty frequently. And going to a country where maybe you don't speak the language or it's your second language or you don't know anyone else there besides 1 or 2 other people, I think it demonstrates a lot of personal skills that end up being valuable when you're going through the interview process and just valuable in general in life. Scholarships you've gotten from merit. Yeah, I mean, it's a nice resume builder that says, hey, look, you know, I'm qualified. Someone else has assessed and I'm qualified or I'm good. So I would say it's worth putting out there. So let's see here. We have one more question. How were you able to decide which company you wanted to work for? Oh, that's a great question. That's a really, really good question. So I decided, I had 3 job offers out of college. One from Pacific Life Insurance out in California, one from Louisville, Kentucky at Mercer, a consulting firm, and then one from State Farm Life Insurance. I picked State Farm because Pacific Life was really far away from my family and my home. California is stunningly beautiful, and it's a fantastic company. Highly encourage anyone the opportunity to take it there. When I went to Mercer and consulting, I had more exams passed than every person who interviewed me, and it sounded like they weren't very supportive of people continuing to get their fellowship, and that was pretty important to me. And it seemed like they, you know, much more work driven. And then State Farm was it was a good company. It was in the town that I was from. And so I really liked that. When I moved to Wisconsin, I picked Northwestern Mutual because I'd worked in the life insurance industry and I knew they were the best life insurance company to work for. Big mutual, biggest mutual, 160 years old. Done a ton of work in the innovation and technology space. super high persistency from their policyholders, super high persistency from their employees, really high value for their products. Just overall, all the companies I interviewed with, I mean, I knew before I started looking how great a company it was. So those are just a few of the things I look for when I was picking companies. Ileana has got her hand up, so I'm going to call on her. Go ahead, Ileana.
Hi, I was wondering, how did you decide to go down like the health and life path versus the property and casualty route?
Hey, Ileana, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was wondering, how did you choose the health and life path versus going down the property and casualty route?
That's a great question. I don't think it was so much that there was one that stood out as, oh, it's definitely better than the others. There's more life jobs, life and health jobs than there are P&C, though P&C is growing. I think it was more just I had experience there, I was comfortable with it. And I really like the financial application. You know, the P&C is much more of the data and statistics application. You know, you read price every 6 months, so you're trying to figure out how to predict super accurately the next thing that's going to happen. On the life insurance side, you know, you take a very long perspective. So you think a lot more about risks and decision making. And I really like the longevity aspect of it, that I knew the decisions I was going to make now would affect what the company was going to do 60 years down the road. From the health perspective, I think, yeah, nothing wrong with health. I think there's just a lot of uncertainty there, a lot of instability. You know, when I was graduating, Obama, the Affordable Care Act had been put in place, and I knew there was tons of work for health actuaries, but it just didn't seem like anything that personally excited me. It's a lot of red tape, a lot of regulation, a lot of working in very specific niche things in the actual world. You kind of become experts in respective areas. The life space, you know, I think you get to work much more broadly in all of the different financial areas. Certainly not the right answer, though. I know loads of people who love their health actuarial jobs, love their P&C jobs. I don't know very many that love their pension jobs.
Okay,
Does that answer your
got it.
question, Brianna?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, we have one more question online. You talk a lot about the importance of computer science skills. Do you see a place for newer actuaries who do not enjoy programming but like other aspects of the job? If so, what departments do you think non-programming actuaries thrive in? So I wouldn't think about it so much like there are departments you're applying for. Most jobs you'll have rotations in different areas. What I'll say is that there's a lot of non-programming ways to deal with technology and data. So it's kind of a necessary evil. I think having it on your resume, having applied it, knowing how it works will end up being really important. But as you progress through your career, you can kind of navigate to the areas that really speak to your skill set and what you want to build more. So like me personally, I very much enjoy the project management and team building and recruitment. So I've moved less from the model building and data analytics and more towards the technology building and managing technology teams, or dealing with and building specific projects. So I hope that answers your question. So I don't see any other questions online, and I don't see anyone with their hands raised. I'll just wait one more second, make sure that you guys are all good. All right, well, do you think with COVID, there's going to be a lot less travel for actuaries and consulting? Yes, I think that there's a good chance a lot of your internships this next summer might be virtual. I mean, it's speculation. And before I end here, I just want to talk about one thing real quick. So I was a recruiter for a while, and one of the things I noticed was that a lot of companies go to the same small number of schools, kind of the centers of actuarial excellence, and they tend to all recruit the same 5 to 10 kids. Those 5 to 10 kids get 5 or 6 job offers, and a lot of companies have really low acceptance rates because of this. And so I started looking at the small colleges early in the recruitment season, where they generally got pushed out and looked at later, especially when you only have 1 or 2 people trying to get through all the resumes. And what I found was that smaller colleges produced the same number of high quality actuaries per capita. They were just more dispersed. So when I moved to Wisconsin, I took these colleges in the Milwaukee area and I brought them all together, and I sat down the presidents at each of the clubs and I said, if you guys came together and ran a single recruitment fair, I think that you can get significantly better turnout than any one college respectively could. And so there are 5 presidents that were on this call, and we set up something called the Wisconsin Actuarial Collegiate Conference. It's 2 weeks from today. It's going to be all virtual. We already have a dozen companies that have registered for it. And if you're interested, I'm going to post my LinkedIn page in the chat here. And if you guys would like to attend and you are not one of the Wisconsin schools who have already been invited, but you would like to personally attend, or you'd like it to open up to your student body, I can send you over the handshake registration link. You guys are welcome to join. Hopefully you heed my advice and you build quality resumes and you have quality questions, and we demonstrate that conferences like this that give access to smaller colleges turn out to be a great way for companies looking to hire great actuaries. So I'll post it here in a minute, and I just want to say thank you all for attending. I have been doing this for a long time purely because I think that being an actuary is an incredibly rewarding career. And the moment you accept a job, your first job, it will change your lives forever. It'll change your family's lives, your children's lives. And the more people I can help get into this profession and be successful, I can't imagine a better way to spend my time. So please reach out to me. I'm very approachable, very easy to talk to, and I recommend that you guys all aspire to be great. Do you recommend freshmen attend the WAC? Freshmen are the most important people to attend. Go talk to companies. I mean, even if you're totally unqualified, the opportunity to talk to a recruiter and start building that relationship early on is huge. I have a stack of resumes that I met when they were freshmen, and I was like, I can't hire you right now, but I know that as soon as a job posting is open, I'm emailing you next year because you're going to be a standout candidate. So yes, do I recommend it to freshmen? Absolutely, extremely important. Everyone should come. So with that, connect with me on LinkedIn, reach out about the WAC. I'll continue posting about it. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out. And thank you guys all so much for attending, and I hope you guys got a lot out of it.